the face of the dawn. The wind moved across the valley like an ancient whisper. It carried the breath of mountains and the musk of the earth, winding through tall grass that shimmered under a pale sun. Herds of aurochs trudged across the open plain, their hooves sinking deep into the damp soil left by the morning mist. High above, vultures circled in silence, watching the world as if waiting for history to begin. At the edge of a river lived a small band of early humans, the Uluru. Their shelters were made of branches and hides, blackened by the smoke of their fires. They lived by the rhythm of the earth, the rise and fall of the sun, the movement of herds, the cycle of hunger and rain. To them, life was not something questioned. It simply was, as fixed as the stars. Among them was Arka, a young man whose face was unlike the others. His brow sloped less, his jaw curved softly. There was a spark in his eyes that made others uneasy, a sharpness, an inward fire. When he looked at the horizon, it was not merely to spot prey or shelter. It was as though he sought something unseen. The others did not notice such things. Their days were for survival, their thoughts bound to the hunt and the night's cold. But Arka often wandered from the camp, drawn to the sound of the river or the shapes of clouds as they drifted. He would trace lines in the dirt with sticks, strange marks no one else understood. The elders murmured that he was touched, not by spirits, but by something wild and restless. One evening, as the sun bled across the western hills, Arka returned to the camp late. The tribe had already gathered around the fire, eating what little meat they'd taken. His mother, Runa, glanced up, her face worn, her eyes full of quiet worry. "Where?" she asked, her voice low, broken by the guttural rhythm of their tongue. Arka only pointed to the cliffs. He could not explain what he had seen. The way the light had turned the rock to gold, or the way his reflection shimmered in the river, strange and almost separate from himself. When he looked into the water, he felt as though he were looking into another world, one where something waited to awaken. That night, he dreamed of faces, faces unlike any he had seen, eyes bright with thought, mouths curved not in hunger but in wonder. When he woke, his chest ached as if the dream had taken root there. Days passed. The air grew colder. The Uluru followed the herds north, moving through forests where trees loomed like giants. Arka walked among them, his feet numb, his mind filled with strange pictures. Once he found a smooth stone shaped like a tear. Its surface gleamed faintly. He held it up to the firelight that night, watching how it reflected flame. "Useless," muttered Kor, the strongest hunter, snatching it from his hand. He tossed it into the dark. Stone does not feed, stone does not kill. But Arka crawled into the dark and found it again. He kept it with him always, polishing it against his skin. To him, the stone was alive. It spoke in silence, showing him shapes, faces, possibilities. One morning, a storm broke over the valley. Thunder rolled like the roar of some god. The Uluru huddled beneath rocks and trees, but lightning struck the plain, splitting a tree in two. Fire leapt up, red and furious. The tribe screamed and fled, fearing the spirit within the flame, all but Arka. He watched the fire devour the branches, mesmerized by the dance of color and heat. When the rain came and the flame hissed and shrank, he stepped closer, eyes wide. Beneath the ash, a single ember glowed, red as blood, alive like the heart of the earth. Something in him moved. Instinct and curiosity tangled. He took a stick and pressed it against the ember. Smoke curled, and then, to his astonishment, the stick caught light. He gasped and dropped it, but the spark had already touched his mind. That night, he returned with the ember hidden in a hollow of bark. While the tribe slept, he coaxed the flame to life again. The warmth spread, chasing the cold. The shadows danced along the cave walls, making the faces of his kin flicker as if they were alive in a new way. When morning came, they found the fire and fell to their knees in awe and terror. Arka stood before them, not as one of them anymore, but as something other, something between man and God. But power, in any age, draws fear. The elder, Thun, growled that it was a curse. The sky fire kills. It kills the tree, it kills the beast. It will kill us. Kor, whose pride smoldered like the flame itself, saw in Arka a threat. "He brings danger," Kor said. "He brings madness." The tribe argued, their words harsh, their gestures fierce. And yet, at night, they crept closer to the warmth. unable to resist. Soon, the fire became their heart. They learned to keep it alive, to feed it, to carry it in glowing stones. The world around them changed. They could cook meat, drive away beasts, see in the dark. But Arka was no longer content. He began to dream again. Dreams of faces changing, of hands shaping tools, of voices breaking into new sounds. He carved lines into the cave wall, tracing the faces he saw in his mind. Not beasts or hunters, but something more delicate, more aware. When Ruchna found him one morning, she touched the drawings, confused. "Why?" she asked. He tried to speak, but the words were not yet born. All he could do was press his hand against the rock beside the drawings. A mark of himself, his shape, his presence. And so, the first art in human history was not made for worship, nor beauty, but for memory. As seasons turned, the Ulru began to change. They stood taller, their eyes sharper, their voices more complex. Arka's own child, born with a softer face and a larger skull, watched the fire with the same quiet intensity. But not all were ready for the new dawn. Kor gathered those who feared the changes. "We were hunters," he said. "Now we are weak. The world bends us." He led them away one night, taking half the tribe with him. They vanished into the dark forest, their cries echoing like ghosts. The Ulru who remained followed Arka north, toward the mountains. They learned to shape stone, to build walls of hide and bone, to share warmth and food. Arka grew older, his hair silvering, but his eyes remained bright. He watched his people laugh for the first time, weep for the dead, hold their children not as creatures, but as hopes. Something had awakened in them, the gift of reflection, the burden of thought. One evening, his son sat beside him by the fire. "Father," the boy said, the words still crude, struggling to form. "Why, fire?" Arka smiled faintly. "Fire is us," he managed to say, his voice broken but sure. "It eats, it lives, it remembers." He touched his face, then the boy's, tracing the curve of the cheekbone, the smoothness of skin. "You," he said softly. "Knew." And in that moment, something shifted again. The first word of meaning, the first recognition of difference, the dawn of language. Years passed. The mountains grew cold. The Ulru spread, their fires flickering across the plains like stars fallen to earth. Arka lived to see his grandchildren, their faces finer, their eyes holding that same deep glimmer of thought. When he finally lay down for the last time, the firelight danced across his face, a face no longer primitive, but something entirely new. His people gathered around, silent, feeling the weight of something they could not name. When he breathed his last, Ruchna pressed her hand to his cheek and whispered the word he had given them. Fire. And as the night deepened, the flames rose higher, their light painting the cave walls where Arka's handprint remained. It glowed as though alive, the mark of the first human who had looked at his reflection and seen not just survival, but self. Outside, dawn crept over the horizon. The sky turned from black to blue, from blue to gold. The world had changed, quietly, forever. The faces that would follow, all the faces of humankind, carried within them that same spark, curiosity, fear, and the unyielding need to understand. The Ulru were gone now, their bones buried beneath millennia of soil. But in every human face that ever came after, there remained a whisper of Arka, the first to see, the first to dream, the first to ask why. And so, the dawn came, not in light alone, but in thought. The fire burned not just in wood and stone, but behind the eyes of a new kind of being.